which is, of course, this is the last term for that book. So.
Okay, so we're going to talk about inheritance tonight. We're going to do a little bit of review from 155. Um, so we create classes, and a class again is just it's a holder of data. So basically, um, for example, I'm just going to open this one and show everybody. So I have this thing called bank account. And bank account is a class. And in there I have this private double balance, and that guy is a instance variable, so it holds something. And down here I have bank account, which is a method, and it has the same exact name as the class. That means it's a constructor. That means it's a method that gets executed when this class is instantiated. And we have balance equals 0, 0. So basically all this constructor does it goes ahead and zeroes out the balance. Again, I have another bank account, and again it has a different signature. Notice that it has double start balance in the parentheses. Up here it's got nothing. That's called overloading. So I've overloaded the constructor called bank account. And this time I need to pass in a double, calling start balance. And it's got if start balance is less than 10, throw blah 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 blah. Okay, and we're going to talk about this stuff more in more detail tonight. Gets into the exception class. And then in here I've got another bank account, which is another constructor. It's a method. This time it's expecting a string. So again, different signature, and different signature. Then I have a method called deposit. Void says I'm returning nothing. The double says I'm expecting a double to be passed in. Deposit, I can also notice have the same exact name, so I'm overloading that method as well. This one has a signature of a double. This one has a signature of a string. I've also got two withdraws. One has a signature of a double, one has a signature of a string. And they both do the same exact thing, except the one that passes the string says convert this string into a double first and then subtract it from balance. Then I've got set balance, again, overloaded, double, string, and I have get balance, which just returns the balance. So that's basically all a class is. It's a holder of data. Now I cannot use this directly. I have to create an object from it. So what I would have to do is, I'll just create one real quick. I'm going to click File, point to New, Class. Oh, make sure I'm in the right one. I'm going to make sure I'm in the right one. So
we're doing chapter 11 again tonight?
I'm going to do, because we're going to cover a couple of inheritance things, so I just want to do a quick review of chapter 11.
Okay.
But then we're going to get into chapter 10. Or I'm sorry, we're going to review chapter 10 and kind of finish up chapter 11. Make sense? Okay. Point to new class. I'm going to call this bank account main. And this is going to have a public static void main method. And in here, so if I want to use that bank account class, I have to basically instantiate an object. So I'm just going to say bank account. I'll just use the lowercase b, bank account is equal to new bank account. Again, going back to the constructor, I have to know what constructor I'm going to use. Well, if I put nothing in the parentheses, that's called a no-R constructor, and there is a no-R constructor in that class bank account. So I come down here and I can say bank account dot, let's do this. Yep, we got set balance and we got double and string. So I could use either one. I'll use the string. I'm going to put double quotes and I'm going to say 250.5. And then I can come down here and say bank account dot get balance. But before I do that, I'm going to basically do a sys o and have it basically print out So very simply, I create a bank account object from the bank account class. So here, new says I'm instantiating it, and right here is this whatever's in this parentheses is basically what is going to be, that's the signature. And since I have nothing in my parentheses, that says use the constructor that has nothing in there. So it's going to execute this and set the balance equal to 0 first time. And then I'm going to set the balance at 250.5, and then it will get the balance. I'm expecting 250.5 to basically come back. So I save it, I run it, and sure enough down here 250.5 shows up, so basically life is good. Now again, I could have done this. I could have started out with 250.5, and instead of set balance, I could have said deposit. I could deposit another 250.5. What are you barking at? Oh. We'll talk about that a little later. What are you expecting? Wow. Okay. That's because it's got the it's got the exception stuff in there. So now when I run it, I'm telling it create the bank account, but also set the balance at 250. And down here, instead of setting the balance 250, I say deposit. I'm going to deposit another $250.50 in, so I should see $501 down here. So when I run it, sure enough, $501. Okay. So now, so that's basically all a class is. Now, in chapter 10, it gets into this thing called inheritance. And we're going to cover, we're not going to cover all of chapter 10. We're just going to kind of cover the all the main concepts. So, I'm going to open this thing called graded activity. So I double click on graded activity down here in the inheritance folder. And right away we can see up here along this gray bar, I see this little light bulb with the red X that says, hey, there's an error. And the error is because it's inside of the inheritance folder. If you click on the little light bulb, it will basically tell you need to add the package declaration inheritance. So I double click on that and it automatically puts that in for me, which is good. And so if we take a look at this, this is just a standard class. It has an instance variable called score, which is a double. Down here I have set score, I have get score, and then I have get grade. Now it's very, very simple. It's a very simple class. There is no constructor. There is no method called graded activity, so it's basically got no constructor, and it allows us to set the score and get the score. But at the same time, it also lets us get a letter grade. So if you look down here at the bottom, there is a method called getGrade. The very first thing it does is it creates a variable called letter grade, which is a char, and it says if the score is greater than or equal to 90, letter grade's an A, 80 it's a B, 70 it's a C, so on and so forth, and then it returns letter grade, because right here it says public char. That char says that's what I'm returning. Now, if we go to grade demo, this is going to use that class. Now again, I see the little light bulb up there, so I have to point to that guy and double click add package declaration and save it. And so what this guy does is it creates a couple of variables, and then it creates a grade object, which is from the graded activity class. And it has us enter some data through the J option pane. And then it says test score is equal to whatever we type in. And then I say grade.setScore via the test score. So whatever we type into the J option pane gets put into the set score. And then it says the grade for that test is, and it says grade.getTheGrade. So it's going to return that char letter grade. So if we go ahead and run this, And I'm going to go ahead and enter in 87, and I click OK. It comes back and says the grade for that test is a B. Okay, so no big deal there. It's pretty simplistic, but let's let's step this up a notch, and we're going to double click on this thing called Final Exam. So I look at Final Exam. Now Final Exam's a little different. If we look at the very first, well, first of all, let's make sure we fix the little light bulb thing because it's expecting a package declaration. If we look at the public class final exam, it says public class final exam. Then behind it, it says extends graded activity. What that says is this class is inheriting everything that graded activity has. So graded activity has set score, and get grade. Now I don't have to type those things in when I use this class because they're already there. The extends graded activity says everything that's in graded activity is also in this class through inheritance. So if we look at the top, we have 3 instance variables. But guess what? There's a 4th one because graded activity already has score as a instance variable. That's also included as well. Again, we don't have to say anything about it because we just know we have access to it. And then we have public final exam and int questions and int miss. So there is a constructor that is expecting 2 integers. If we come down, are there any more? Nope. So in this particular case, when we create or instantiate a new object from this class, it is expecting 2 integers to be passed to it in the constructor. And there it says double numeric score, so it creates a variable, and it says num questions equals questions, num missed equals missed, and then it says points each equals 100 divided by the questions, numeric score is equal to 100. So here's what it's doing. It says every exam is worth 100 points. So if you only have 80 questions, we need to figure out how many points each question is worth. And that's what this line here is doing. It takes 100 points, divides by the number of questions. So now we know how much each question is worth. And then the numeric score is equal to 100 minus missed times points each. So we are going to send it the number of questions a student missed. And then we're also going to send it the number of questions. So when it gets through with that constructor, it's going to have a numeric score set. So right here it says set score, numeric score. Notice we have no set score in here anywhere. There's no set score. Where is set score? It's in the graded activity, what this guy inherits from. And then I've got get points each, so returns points each, so that's a standard getter. Get num missed is another standard getter, so we have 2 getters, we have no setters. There's no setters in here. So, if I go ahead and double click on Final Exam Demo, this is the guy that's going to utilize Final Exam. So if we look, I've got string input, int questions, int missed. That's going to get how many questions were on the final exam. It's going to put that into input and then throw that into questions. And then it gets how many questions did the student missed. It's going to throw that into the variable missed. And then right here it says final exam, exam equals new. So here's where it's creating a new object called exam. It instantiates it with the number of questions and the number of questions missed. And again, there is a set score and get score. Now notice down here in my J option pane it says each question counts as exam.get points each. And then it says get exam.get score and exam.get grade. Now again, those 2 methods were not in the final exam class. They're in the graded activity class. But since the final exam inherits from graded activity, they are there. So if I run this, what don't you like? Number 10, line 10. Oh, I forgot to get my, that's right. Click on the light bulb, double click add package. There you go. Now we should be fine. So I go ahead and run this, and it comes up as how many questions of the exam. I'm going to say 80. How many questions student missed? I'm going to say 12. I'm going to click OK. It comes back and says each question is worth 1.25 points. The exam score was 85%. The exam grade is a B. Okay. So, not too bad. So again, kind of going back, I've got this class called Graded Activity, and it's just a standard class. And then I've got Final Exam, which extends Graded Activity. So this class has everything inside of it, plus everything that Graded Activity has.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What week are we
Oh, let's talk about that real quick. Let's talk about that real quick.
I
So,
just want to make sure I don't go
okay, so here's the deal. I went ahead and changed the syllabus. I'll make sure I send this out in an email as well.
Your last video for week 2 didn't have any volume.
You had what?
No volume.
It didn't? I'm kind of playing around with this, so. If you go to, if you do a search on YouTube for CIS 155 and look at chapters, did we get into 11? Well, if you get into chapter 10, that's kind of what we're covering tonight. Okay, if we take a look at the syllabus, hopefully. Okay, and scroll to the very last page. There is the outline. Now, so here's what we're going to do. Is on week 7, I'm going to give you the midterm, and it will be due on week 9. Now, the one thing I want to make clear is the midterm's only going to cover week 1 through 5. So it's only going to cover these weeks right here. The final is going to cover weeks 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11. It's only going to cover 5 weeks. So each one's going to cover 5 weeks. The reason I'm doing that is week 8 I will be gone, and week 12 I will be gone. So instead what I'm doing is I'm giving you a take-home exam to basically do those, and then the exams will be due the following week. Does that make sense? So you notice it says right here, week 8, midterm exam is over week 1 through 5. But down here at 12 it says final exam is over week 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11.
Week 3?
We are on week 3. Okay. So getting back to inheritance, first of all, any questions?
Are we still working on inheritance?
Yeah, we just covered it, didn't we?
Yeah, I'm gonna get tired later.
Okay.
Explaining inheritance.
So, now one thing I do want to talk about is in previous chapters, chapters 6, 8, and I think 9, they talked about they would have a class, and one of the instance variables was an object from another class. And let's talk about that. And whenever we have, so let's say for example, in this particular, I'm just going to use this as an example. So right here, I'm going to have private dot bank account not bank account, but private bank account. So what I'm telling it is I have a do this real quick. So what I'm telling is I have an object, bank account. What is bank account? It's a bank account class. So it's basically an object created for the bank account class. So this is an object. This is a variable. This is another instance variable. This is an object. So what we have is we have a class called Final Exam, and it has a object called bank account. We call that relationship a has a relationship. So the Final Exam has a bank account inside of it. Now, when we inherit, page 629, when we inherit, for example, we have graded activity. We have Final Exam that extends graded activity. What we say in this case, the Final Exam is a graded activity. So this is called a is a relationship. This guy over here is called a has a relationship. So Final Exam has a bank account. Over here, Final Exam is a graded activity. So it's a form of a graded activity. It has everything a graded activity has, but a little bit more. So it has a score, it has a set score, it has a get score, it has a get grade. It also has a num questions, points, num missed, get points, and get num missed. So it has all of those things along with the graded activity. So has a relationship and is a relationship. Very, very important to understand when we're basically working with different objects and such.
I like my other seat better.
What's that?
I said I like my other seat better. I can see better.
Well, no, it's this thing. This is terrible.
What page does that say?
That's on page 629.
I can't. It's blurry.
Yeah, I know. That is a terrible overhead projector. So.
That's funny because I have that page bookmark.
Good job. She probably has it in that book. But it's probably not going to be the same page, obviously.
Well, that's why I bookmarked it, or I put it over there so she can just read along.
So now let's take a look at a very simple program, and it's called subclass 1, subclass 2. So it's basically, let's take a look at subclass 1. Now, in this guy, it says, let me take care of my add package declaration. Here it says public class subclass 1 extends superclass. Now, let me talk about that relationship for a quick second. Whenever we have an is a relationship, Final Exam is a graded activity, final exam is the subclass, and graded activity is the superclass. So it's the one that basically has everything, and everything below it inherits from it. Now realize it's not a two-way street. Graded activity has no access to num questions, get points each, get num missed. It has no availability at all to any of that. So it's a one-way street, meaning final exam has everything graded activity has, but graded activity cannot see anything in final exam. So, so here we have subclass extends superclass. Now if I double click on superclass 1, this is just a superclass, and it does something very simplistic. And it says, let me get this guy taken care of. And it basically says this. This is the constructor. It's going to execute when it gets instantiated, and it says system out print line. This is a superclass constructor. We go back to the subclass, and it also says it's got its own constructor, and it says this is the subclass constructor. Well, since we have this guy inheriting from the other guy, so the subclass is a superclass, which constructor gets executed? Well, if we run this guy, which one is it? It's the constructor demo 2. So I double click on constructor demo 2, and here all it does is it just creates a subclass object, subclass 2 object. Notice there's no superclass. And, oh, let me take care of this guy. And when I run it, we get an error. What's it say? Oh, I forgot to do this guy. So I run this. And what are you marking at?
Did you forget your own?
Oh, I forgot it there as well. Darn it. Thought I already got all that. Okay. So I'm going to try one more time. Run it. And now it says the following argument was passed to the superclass constructor 10. This is the subclass constructor. So notice that the superclass 2, I got the wrong one by the way. So superclass 1, what I was looking at. That's what I should have been running, was that one. Sorry. Don't want to confuse the issue. There we go. So let's run that. So there it says this is the superclass constructor, this is a subclass constructor. So guess what? It executes both constructors. But which one does it execute first? It executes the superclass constructor first. So here I have subclass 1, extend superclass. This is the subclass constructor. I look at the superclass 1, and it basically doesn't extend anything, but it on its constructor says this is a superclass constructor. So whenever I do an instantiation, so when I do this guy right here, this is instantiation. When I instantiate object, it's creating a subclass 2 object, and right here it says new. This is where it executes the constructor. The very first thing it does is says, hey, does the superclass have a constructor? If it does, and the signature is the same, I'm going to execute that first, and then come back to the subclass and execute that subclass constructor. In the subclass 2 and superclass 2, superclass 2 is a little different in this case, that it has two constructors. One is a no argument constructor, there's nothing in the parentheses, and the other one has an int signature. So this is a superclass with a no arg constructor. This is a superclass with a constructor. So if I were to run constructor demo 2, notice it says the following argument was passed to the super constructor, and it shows 10, so it does the superclass constructor first, then it does the subclass constructor. Any questions on that? We can override. Now I've talked about overloading. Overloading says it has a different signature. Overriding has the same exact signature, but which one's going to be executed?
The one on the paper,
Right. What?
the one on the one you're working on.
Right. So if we were to look at the curved activity, so if I looked at curved activity, notice that this guy, so it's got extends graded activity, so it's got the same inheritance as the final exam, so it's going to have everything graded activity has. And I come down here, and here it's got a set score. Remember, there's a set score method in the graded activity. And it's got the same exact double signature. So it's got a double signature for that set score as well. So which set score does it execute? It's going to execute whatever class you instantiated. So if I instantiated the graded curved activity, it's going to execute this set score. If I created a graded activity class, instantiated that, and then basically use the set score, it's going to use the set score for the graded activity class. So again, if I run the demo, it says enter the student's raw numeric score. I'm going to say 80. The percentage we'll say is 8. And there it says the raw score is 80 points. The curve score is 640. The exam grade is an A. Okay. So again, so when it said set score, it used the set score in the curved activity and not in the graded activity. So overriding has a method with the same signature. But now whenever we're doing overriding, we're actually talking about inheritance. We're talking about using a method in the class we are instantiating. Okay, I don't want to dwell on that too much because we covered that pretty extensively in 155. But the reason I wanted to cover that is for the Chapter 11 stuff. So in Chapter 11, I believe we left off last week on number 2, I believe. Yeah, on page 723, if you're going by the one book, it's going to be 11.2, throwing exceptions.
We only got to 11.2 yet?
There's only 4. There's only 4 sections in the whole chapter. We're not going to dwell a whole lot on 11.3 and 11.4. So, I'm about ready to run out of time here for my recording.
Might as well just break it.
So let's take a break. Let's come back